Hello everyone, this is April with Craft Knife Chronicles, and in this series of videos we will make my project that I call the Blank Canvas Village. The Blank Canvas Village is a three-dimensional paper project made entirely out of chipboard, which sits on a 12-inch by 12-inch base and is 12 inches tall at the roof peak of the tallest building. The project is named Blank Canvas Village because it is designed to showcase your choice of any paper or mixed media to cover the buildings. There is a materials and cutting guide which accompanies this video series. We're looking at the first page of that 3-page document now, and this document is available as a free download from Dropbox.com. And the link to that download will be in the description of the video below. On the first page of the materials and cutting guide, there is a picture of the chipboard version of this project before it has been decorated with any paper or embellishments. Also listed on the bottom are the materials and supplies you need to complete this project. On the second page of this document, we have the cutting guide. It lists the medium weight chipboard at the top and the lightweight chipboard in the section at the bottom. You'll also notice that some of the items are highlighted, and those are Stoop G and H. Now the reason they're highlighted, there's a note down here at the bottom about this, is that the length of those two units depends on how much decoration you put on buildings I and K. Now G and H have been sized so that as long as the decorations on I and K don't exceed about a 1/16 of an inch, there'll be plenty of room if you use the measurements here that are given. Now, if the decorations get thicker, you'll need to increase these measurements of the length to allow for the thickness of those decorations on I and K. And when we look at the layout here in a second, you'll see exactly why that matters. But I've allowed for a little play in there, so as long as you don't have anything more than about a 1/16 of an inch on I and K, these measurements that are here should work fine. On the third and final page of the document, at the top we have a chart that lists the length, width, and height for each of the objects, whether it's a building or a stoop. And then for the buildings, the roof height column lists the width of the chipboard that the roof pieces are cut from. On the bottom is the layout, which shows how all of the buildings and stoops go together. And here I think you can see what we were talking about on the page before, how the length of stoop G and building H are equal to the combined widths of I and K. So if I and K, their widths grow as the result of the decorations that you've put on them, then the length of G and H would need to be adjusted as well. And if that's the case, just go up to the chart and cross out the lengths that are here and substitute your revised lengths, and then follow along with the construction using those revised lengths. But as I said before, as long as you keep your decorations on the adjoining sides to around a 1/16 of an inch, you won't have any concerns with that. And in fact, there's just a little bit of play allowed in there so that in case things grow a little bit. All of the other buildings and stoops in the layout can be shifted to allow for variations in the thickness of their decorations. In this section, we will prep the chipboard for the building walls and the stoops. Now, since I've elected to use lightweight chipboard for my building walls, I think we need to have some interior support pieces for them. So our first step will be to mark for the placement of those interior support pieces. Now I've pulled out first my 3 buildings that are 4 inches tall, A, J, and O, and we'll start with those. These 4-inch tall buildings will only have one interior support piece. So to mark for that, we will turn our building on its side so that the 4 inches is sitting across, and we'll just mark a center line down the length here. So I'm just using my ruler and marking a line that is 2 inches right down the center, and I will repeat that for the other 2 buildings. For all of the other buildings, it doesn't matter what height they are, we will have 2 interior support lines, and try to get them split about equal distance. So let's start with the first one I have here on top, which is building C. So again, for all of these buildings, we will turn them on their side. This building is 6 inches, so that's easily divided by 3, so I'll just make 2 lines at 2 inches apart. So now I have 2 lines drawn for my interior support pieces. So here I have building D, and building D is one of 2 buildings that the chipboard is cut square. It's both 8 inches tall and 8 inches wide. So make sure when you're working with this that the stiffness is going to be in the building's vertical direction. So I have the stiffness going this way, and we want to draw our support lines perpendicular to that stiffness, so I'll turn it this way. And then 8 inches isn't easily divided by 3, but just, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm just going to mark, I think, at about 2 3/4 up from the bottom and the top. But it doesn't have to be exact, and when we get to other ones, just do something so that you get approximately 3 equal sections. Now that I have all of my lines drawn for my internal support pieces, it's time to do some scoring. Now on the cutting guide, in the same section where we saw what size to cut each of these pieces, it also says how to score them. For instance, here for buildings A and J, it says with 8 inches at the top, score it 2 inches, 4 inches, and 6 inches. So I've got my piece laid out here. This is my A piece, 8 inches at the top, and it is possible to score this on your scoreboard if you just go slowly. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can use some other method to scoring, but this seems to work fine for me. So I just go slowly. And I usually go twice in each one. Sometimes you might get off and then just correct yourself and get back on. But if you concentrate on staying vertical, usually you'll be successful. So there's my scoring at 2, 4, and 6. And I'll just follow that for every other piece that is on the list here and do that scoring. Now that you have all of the scoring done, go ahead and fold on each one of the creases. And then use your bone folder to reinforce those creases so we get a nice sharp corner. So you can see how our buildings will start to take shape. And just repeat that process for all 12 of the buildings. especially take your time as the heights of the building get longer. Now that we have all of our corners folded and reinforced with our bone folder, we can go ahead and prep for joining by adding one of our cardstock joining strips. These are the ones that are cut 3/4 of an inch wide, scored down the middle at 3/8 of an inch, and then have 1/4 inch score tape on either side of that score line on the outside. And so I've just cut this to length, and I might not really mitered the corners, just kind of trim them back a little bit, and I'll just line that up with one side and reinforce that with my bone folder. And once we have that joining strip put on, we can add our ledger strips both to the top and the bottom and along the interior lines, whether it's 2 lines or 1 line for the 4-inch tall ones. So these are the ledger strips. The cutting guide tells you how many you'll need. They're cut out of medium weight chipboard, and they're 1/4 inch wide by 12 inches long, and they're backed with score tape. And so I just cut these about 1/4 of an inch shorter than the side of than each side of the building. So example, in this building the sides are 2.5 inches, so I'll cut my pieces 2 1/4 inches. The exception is at this last piece, you want to cut it about 1/2 inch shorter, because you have to allow for this join to come in, and you don't want that to be on top of your ledger strip. So I'll just cut my pieces that I need here, and then I'll be back. So one other important thing I didn't mention when I put this piece down here, I covered up my letter designation, so make sure you come on the outside and put the letter so that you know which building this is that you're working on. If you didn't cover it up, then you won't have that problem, but I did, so just make sure it's visible from the outside. So to install our ledger strips, on the top edge and the bottom edge, we'll center them inside of the building side and hold them a 16th of an inch back from the edge. Now if you have a hard time judging that 16th of an inch, just use a spare piece of medium weight chipboard and come in and use that as a spacer to get that 16th of an inch. And I should say I'm just using black chipboard here, just so that you'll see a contrast and be able to tell what's going on here better. There's no reason for using the black other than for demo purposes. It makes it easier for you to see. So I'll put 2 more 2 1/4 inches pieces here, and then when I get down to this end, I'll put my 2-inch piece in and hold it back from the edge so that there's room for my joining strip. So I'll finish my top edge. So I have my top edge installed here, and for this piece that has 2 interior rows of support pieces, for the one closest to the top, I'll put my ledger strips on towards the middle here, so I'm just lining them up with the line that I drew before, and then just coming along and putting them in like that. And then for this side, I will put them in again so that the ledger strip is towards the middle, and align it with that line and continue on along there. And then finally I'll put another row along the bottom, again keeping it a 1/16 of an inch back from the edge. And once you get all of the ledger strips attached, go ahead and give them a good burnish with a bone folder. For the 3 buildings that are only 4 inches tall, there's of course only one internal support layer, and if this is my top, I just line them up so that they're below the line that I drew here. And of course I remembered to write my letter on the outside where I can see it. So I'll just proceed with my other buildings. So here are all my buildings with the ledger strips added, and I'm just set these aside for a few minutes. Now we're ready to work on the stoops, and there are 5 stoops. I have them cut to length according to the cutting guide. And again, I'll follow the instructions over here in the notes for the scoring. For instance, here at the top I have stoop B, and it says with 8 inches at the top, score at 2 inches, 4 inches, and 6 inches. So I'll just score it at 2 inches, 4 inches, and 6 inches. And then I'll follow the instructions for my other stoop pieces and get those scored as well. Now that all the stoops have been scored, we'll go ahead and fold on the score lines and reinforce those folds with our bone folder. And when you're making these folds, make sure you line up and keep one side directly on top of the other. With these narrow pieces, it's easy for those creases to get off of vertical. Now that our score lines have all been creased and reinforced, then we can go ahead and add a joining tab to the left end, similarly to how we did in a longer version for the buildings. Now here I've just gone, in our cutting guide it told us to cut a strip that's a 1/2 inch wide, and I've just backed that with some score tape, and I'll put it on. I've cut these about 1 1/4 inches, and I'll put them about halfway on the end here and let that end just kind of hang off. And I'll do that for each one. Now once I've put that tab on the end there, I think you might be able to see that it's hanging over just a little bit. So I'll just use my craft knife and trim that off. And then down here, this is sticky, so I'll just put the leftover backing on that part so that I don't get it stuck to anything prematurely. So when we put these together, they'll form the little stoops that we'll have, and we'll want to fit in our top and our base. And in order to do that, we'll have a ledger strip, and this is what the cutting guide called for some ledger strips that were 3/8 inch wide. These again are cut from medium weight chipboard, and it's just 3/8 of an inch wide. And the reason for that is that we can use one piece and center it there. We'll cut it into lengths like we did before, center it so there's a 1/16 of an inch on the top and the bottom, and that way we'll be able to put both the base and the top in and just have to use one ledger strip. So here's one of my stoops with the ledger strips installed. I again cut these to be a 1/4 inch shorter than the section they're going in, except for this last one I've cut it a 1/2 inch long shorter so that this tab from our joining strip can fit in down here. And so I'll just go ahead and repeat that process for the other 4 stoops. And this is what the 5 stoop pieces look like once they've been prepped with their ledger strips and joining tabs. To construct the stoops, first we'll join them to make a square or rectangle, and this is just a butt joint on these 2 ends, and just put them together, and then of course reach in here and burnish that. And then here I have the 2 pieces of a chipboard, medium weight chipboard. Again, I'm just using black so you can see the contrast better. You can use whatever color you want. And we will run a bead of glue along first doesn't matter if it's the top or the bottom, just one of the ends. Just run that bead of glue around the whole perimeter. And I even put some glue over here where there isn't a ledger strip, but I want to attach it. Now here's where my join is down here, and that's the corner I want to start putting this in. Now this will be a very snug fit, so I've got my craft knife that has an old blade here so that I can use that to kind of coax this to fit inside of that piece. So I'll just go ahead and do that. And once you've got it attached on one side, you can flip it over and repeat this process on the other side. Then once you've got both sides in, we'll just set that aside to dry and repeat that for the other 4 stoops. So here are the 5 little stoops all glued up. Putting the buildings together is similar to putting the stoops together, and especially for the tops and the bottoms. The only thing that is really different, of course, is that they're taller and that there are some interior supports. This is the A building. It has 1 row, and most of the other ones have 2 rows. So we'll start first by joining this to make it 3D by removing the backing, and then this is again just a simple butt joint here between these 2 pieces. Try to get everything lined up and then reach inside and burnish that joint. Now once you have that joining strip burnished, the first thing we're going to do is put in the interior support, and in this case there's just 1, and we're going to put it in from the top. So I'm going to take my detailed gluer and just run a bead of glue right along those ledger strips that are down inside there. And once I have glue in there, I can just put this in on kind of a diagonal or somehow just to get it inside of there and get it to rest on that platform. Now, this building is short enough that you can reach in from the top and the bottom to get that in place. And then, especially for the tall ones, but even for this one, this is a very stiff ruler. It's about 1/8 of an inch of thick plastic, and so I can use that to tap this down and get that in place. Now, if you in your decorations are going to want to put something on where you want to put a fastener inside of the building, then you may not want to put the top and the bottom on until you get that done. But if you're not, then you would just follow the same procedure like we did with the stoops and run a bead of glue along the top, and then get that piece in, and then run a bead of glue along the bottom and fit that piece in. So I haven't decided yet, so I'm just at this point, I'm only going to put my central, my interior platforms in. So that is how to do it for one that has, the 4-inch one that only has one interior support. Now this is building C, which as you can see has 2 interior support rows. Again, I'll just remove the backing strip from the joining paper there, and then make my butt joint here and reach in and burnish that. Once you have that joining strip burnished, first we'll work from the top side, run a bead of glue along the topmost interior ledger strips and pop one of our pieces in. So now that these buildings are getting a little taller, you may not be able to reach in from the bottom and help get something straightened out, so that's when a long ruler or some kind of tool will come in handy. And it's a little fiddly. And then once you get it kind of leveled out, you can just take your tool and get that situated on the ledger strips. And then we'll flip that over and do the same process on the second interior row of ledger strips. Now of course you can't reach in from the bottom to help get this aligned, but because it's already been made into a rectangular shape by putting in the first piece, it's a lot easier to get this second piece going in straight, and then just use your tool to get it down and set on those ledger strips. And then again, if you are not going to need to reach in to put any fasteners on, or any embellishments on, you can go ahead and run a bead of glue and put your top and bottom pieces on. And so just repeat that process for all of the buildings. So if you're like me, I don't have any glues that can fit inside of building K because it's too narrow, so I can't get in there to put glue on my ledger strip. So what I've done is I've just cut a piece of ribbon. You could use string. Oh, it's probably about 12 inches long. Could be a little bit longer, so you don't have to worry about if it's not gonna, if you won't be able to hold on to it or not. And I just thread it through those 2 holes that I punched with my crocodile, and now tying a knot in the end, just so I have this kind of action going on here. And then I'm going to run a bead of glue on the underside here, and that piece of ribbon will give me something to hold on to so that I can try to feed it in here, get it going as straight as possible. Just kind of gently pushing it in there, and then I can use that ribbon if I need to, and I'm just kind of pushing in on all the sides about the same amount at the same time till I can get it down to where the ledger strip is. And that ribbon has allowed me to keep control of it, and if it starts going a little too crooked, I can pull it back up a little bit, and then just using my long ruler I've been able to get it on to the ledger strip. And I'll repeat that for the other side. And then you can just simply snip that ribbon and pull it out so you don't have any ribbon left in there.